I've got it right now.
Okay, nice. So thank you all for joining. Let me just share the presentation right away and we can get right into it. I'm not the greatest at giving presentations, but let's see how this goes. So the topic I wanted to discuss today was what actually makes a good backend developer LinkedIn profile. So what are the things we should be looking for or when we are recruiting people? What do we want to see? What do we don't want to see? And stuff like that. But before I give insights into LinkedIn profile, let's first discuss a bit struggles of finding good backend developers. So when you say backend, it's a massive area. So one of the first thing is there are so many backend languages and they are constantly changing. I know, like, is Adam here? I don't see him, but he was one of the front-end people, or at least I think he's more in the front-end. And you can tell that in front-end you also have many different, not really languages, but frameworks. But it's still just one like main language called JavaScript. On backend, it's a completely different story. There are so many languages, and it's really hard when you are looking for a position. Usually it requires you to know one or two, and a person can be a brilliant developer, but he might not be working with the languages we might need. So there are so many languages. And when I first started programming, one of the first languages I did was C. After C, we did C++. Then we did C#. Then on a second year at university, we were doing PHP and Java. And it just kept going on. And right now, I'd like to say that I'm decent in a couple of languages, but there are so many. The most popular right now, and ones we are looking for, are Python, Kotlin. And I saw that maybe we also want somebody who knows Go and stuff like that, but there are like so many languages, and that's one of the barriers of one of the struggles of finding good backend developers. Other point is every language also has a framework. No, I mean, not every language, but most of the backend languages have frameworks. So to describe a framework in my words, it's just some kind of library or some kind of wrapper around the language that basically helps you create applications faster if you know how to use a framework. So if you take a look at the Python, if you take a look at our Notion and people we are looking for, we don't just say Python, we also want Django. And Django is a framework for Python. So somebody can have 5 years of experience with Python, he can be absolutely brilliant, but it could happen that that person never actually used Django. And there's still a learning curve that goes to that. You cannot be just good at the language, you also have to be aware of the frameworks. So that's also one of the struggles, not only finding right people with the language, they also have to be willing to know a framework or willing to learn it and learn it fast if we are looking for more senior roles. And a third point can be just being good at one language is just not good enough. So I know from personal experience, I was working with a few people that had 10 plus years of experience doing just backend work, but they would be good at one language. I had few people that were extremely good at PHP. PHP is a language that kind of has a bad rap to it, but it's still a perfectly fine language and you can find jobs requiring it. But what kind of limited them was their unwillingness to pick up a new language. They were perfectly fine knowing just one language. They knew that they will always be able to find a job, but just sometimes even the most brilliant developers are just not willing to pick up something new. And especially as they grew kind of older, they kind of lost the passion of learning new things. And that can also be a struggle when we want to find somebody who's a senior at a language. He can have 10 years of experience, but if he doesn't want to learn a language we need or we might need in the future, that can also be a barrier. And also there's a different views on architecture. So one of the topics I was going to discuss in this presentation was microservices and what they introduced. But I quickly realized if I went to that route, this presentation might take forever. So I'll just do a brief overview. So I think that most of us here watched the movie Social Network, where it's a movie about Mark Zuckerberg and how he created Facebook. If you go back like 10 years ago, every system was basically a monolithic application. And I will explain what that means. Like 10 years ago, Facebook was PHP monolith, most of the Facebook backend code. So what a monolith is basically when your entire code or your entire code logic, everything on the backend is inside one code base. And it's most often just using one language. It's all in one place. It all interacts with each other. And that's great at first.
Muito obrigado. Você me ajuda muito. Muito obrigado mesmo.
Hi, Nicole, can I?
I'm muted. Go ahead.
Okay, thanks. So yeah, if you take a look at, again, Facebook, it was a monolithic application. So what does that mean? So imagine on Facebook, you have many different features, like you can add friends, you can exchange messages, you can write a status, you can like pictures, yada, yada, yada. That was all inside one code base. So, and what that made people do is be really fast at the beginning, but you can imagine going forward when there's a new feature, new thing to add, anything new, it just quickly starts slowing down. So the curve in which you are right out of the gate was really fast. You can create a small application really, really fast, but as more and more features and business ideas come along, it just gets unmaintainable. And what usually happens, so if you take a look at Facebook, it was first just for app for university. And it quickly came from app for university to the state to the whole world. And what happens is when the app is so popular and so many people are using it, you start having latency problems. The app starts slowing down. And one of the ways you can deal with that is just let's buy better servers. Let's buy more memory. Let's buy more CPU. Let's throw more money at it. And that's in IT world called vertical scaling. So basically you buy better equipment. But what happens when you already bought the best equipment you can and it's just not good enough, it's just not performing? Well, then the idea of horizontal scaling came along, where we don't only have one application running Facebook, we have multitude servers. So what happens if 10 people go to the Facebook, they might go to the completely different places, and that can solve partially the problem. But then the problem rises up that we have few features that are just not used that much, but we are still running on the fastest servers. So if you, for example, how often do people really update their profile? For example, change their email, change their name on Facebook? Not that often. But what they do often is browse the news, like the pictures, like the status. So you can see that there are some points in the app that just require more speed, that require to be there fast. And there are some parts where we are okay to be slower. So treating everything equally didn't make sense. Hence, the microservice architecture came along. And I think it really picked up from 2011 onwards. I haven't done my due diligence on that one, but that's what I at least think. So what happened is they decided we can split our application into many small ones. So we can, the part of Facebook that just browses the news can be one application. And we can use a database that is optimized for searching for faster results, maybe like Elasticsearch. And I don't have to go too technical, but that's the basically idea of microservices. Let's break the application into smaller pieces, and we can treat those pieces differently. We can store data differently. We can have less powerful servers if a part of application isn't that used, and we can have better servers or better logic or caching policies about the parts that are actually being used a lot more. And that also made finding backend developers harder because not everybody likes that architecture. Some people just like writing monoliths and are not that used to writing microservices, and that's totally fine. But again, when you are looking for people, you want to find people that are willing to do both and are experienced in both, and that's just not easy. And the last point I want to say is, where do you actually draw a line between a backend and frontend, or for example, a backend and DevOps job. So if you take a look, if you look at the design of a page, you can clearly say, oh, okay, that's a front-end job. He's just changing the color, he's adding the pictures, he's changing the font. You can clearly say that's a front-end job or a designer, UX designer job. Or if somebody is worrying about where do we deploy application, how do we manage, how do we push the new changes, you can say that's a DevOps part. But what happens in a world right now where you have to do logic inside the front-end app? So for example, when you see something on the screen, there's quite a bit of logic behind it. It's not just some random data that designer put there. It's actually logic coming from somewhere. And is it a front-end developer job to pull that data? Is it his job to worry about filtering, searching, or is that more of a backend job? So that also means, does the backend developer also have to know how to write front-end code or maybe use JavaScript? And I think it does. But you have, again, from company to company, it changes. The rules of a backend developer changes. I know in the really big companies, even the stuff like choosing the right database, formatting the tables, normalizing them, they had a full database engineering team about it. But in many companies, that's a part of the backend developer job to know how to do those things. But it can be that somebody comes from a really big company and he never did that part. And that can also be something we need. So those are just few struggles of finding backend developers that we are pretty much dealing with on daily basis. But now let's jump into what I think a good LinkedIn profile is. And I'll talk about few sections on the LinkedIn that you probably already know a lot about. But yeah, they are still important to talk about. And I'll say what I personally like seeing. A lot of the things I'm going to say are subjective and you can disagree or agree, but at least I think we will find few common grounds, common areas that we can all say are pretty much good to have or bad to have. So one of the most important sections is skills and endorsements. And I would emphasize skills are a lot more important than actually seeing a lot of endorsements, and for a good reason that I'm going to mention a bit later. So the common question people usually have when they create a LinkedIn profile is there any value in adding skills? Is there any value in having many endorsements? Are those endorsements important? And what do we do with the fake endorsements? So what I think are the positives about having the skills sections and actually naming the things you are good at, it just makes the process of recruiting that much easier when you can jump on somebody's profile and see, okay, he's working with Python, he's working with Django. Okay, we are looking for those things. And you don't have to go into details. It's not like you name a skill and you have to say Python, 2 years, and I did all of these things. You just name it. And during the interview process, you can see how well that person knows a skill. So it's just with a single statement, you can tell somebody what you did, and that goes a long way. And also it helps you get noticed. It helps recruiters search for candidates because you can boil it down. You can go with somebody's profile, and if you see some technologies, for example, you see PHP and Go, but we are looking for Python and Kotlin. Okay, maybe not the best fit. It just helps you eliminate candidates. It can sometimes misfire. That person can also be a great Python developer, but I kind of say it's their fault if they are really good at something and they are not naming it. And also there is a thing called LinkedIn machine learning algorithm. So what does that do? If you ever saw somebody have many endorsements, so what endorsement is for example, if I visit somebody's profile, for example, I worked with Misha for 6 months now, and I know that Misha is really, really good at Python. And I can go on his page and I can endorse his Python. That's basically me saying, I had a pleasure of working with Misha, or I had a pleasure of seeing Misha's Python code, and I vouch for him that he's highly skilled at that technology. So that's what endorsements are. And what LinkedIn machine learning algorithm does, if, for example, I endorse Misha and maybe somebody who is extremely good at Python endorses Misha, that person who is like extremely good, their name will pop up first. It will say like, for example, Bob endorsed Misha, and Bob is highly skilled in Python. So those endorsements from people who are also highly skilled at the technology can mean a lot. So and that also will tie into negatives of giving the fake endorsements. But if you see somebody highly skilled at technology and he is praising somebody, that's a really good sign. And just to kind of say for backend developers, what I usually would love to see in the skills is some of the, of course, backend languages like Go, Python, Kotlin, Java, Node. And it can also be like frameworks. As you know, we are searching for Spring Boot or Django. In future, it can be Flask. Those can all be named. So seeing those things is a good thing for backend developers. Databases, if somebody says, it can just be a skill called databases. That's kind of, for me, it's a nice thing to say, but it's also good to specify, I'm good with Postgres, maybe MongoDB, Elasticsearch. All of these things are good skills to see if you are looking for backend people. And additionally, it's a good thing to see, for example, somebody being comfortable with Kubernetes, Docker, AWS, and some design patterns. So for example, somebody is good with agile development, Scrum, microservices. Those are more like broad terms, but they're also good to see. However, if you go on somebody's profile and you see like they are very good with CSS or React, Angular, and they aren't really naming backend languages, then that person is more likely to be good at frontend. So I would look for those languages we would want that are named here, and maybe some more. I can give a short list what we would be looking for backend devs, but those are the skills I would look for. When it comes to negatives, what the bad parts are: fake skills, fake endorsements, and lack of endorsements. Lack of endorsements is weird because it can throw recruiters off. For example, you can see 0 endorsements and think, oh, this person isn't really good. But it can also happen that the person is really good, just doesn't have many endorsements because, I don't know, maybe he was working fully remotely or working alone on a few projects. So he didn't get that much endorsements from other people. And it can also be that somebody is just put a new skill there and he can be really, really good. But just because it's a new skill he added, people can see, oh, 0 endorsements. But it can throw people off. So I wouldn't say that 0 endorsements on a skill mean anything, but fake skills and endorsements mean a lot. So for example, if Bob, let's say Bob, says he's really good at Python, and we have an interview with him and we ask him some we can ask him some hard questions about Python, and he doesn't know, that's totally fine, because somebody saying he's good at Python can mean a lot of things. But then we ask some really basic things and he's still struggling. And we kind of get an impression that he just put that skill without knowing it. And if he lied about that skill, what's to say he didn't lie about other skills as well? So for me, that's kind of a red flag. I mean, not really a red flag. Somebody can think he's good at something and not be, but it's still, you shouldn't really lie about technologies you know. And also, I want to talk about bad skills to see for backend developers. There aren't really any bad skills. And any skill you name is a good quality to have. But again, if you see stuff like HTML, CSS, Photoshop, design, JavaScript, and some front-end frameworks, then that person is more likely to be more on the front-end side and less on the backend. Again, not a bad quality to have, but might not be what we are looking for. So another section I was going to say is experience. So experience is an important section. I would say beside the skills is what we want to really see. And I found some really nice experience. I kind of blur out the company name. It still shows probably somewhere in the text, but it shows a journey from a person that started in 2016 as a software engineer, then kind of became an intern program lead, and again, a software engineer. Then he kind of went on a more technical and support team. And at the end, he was like a development team lead. That's like a good journey. And you can see like at the very bottom as a full stack developer, that means he also did both backend and frontend, and maybe even some DevOps work. So that's a really good quality to see that somebody is comfortable with doing everything. I haven't really read everything, but it's just like what I personally love seeing, not just naming where you worked, but also giving those small insights into what it is that you actually been working on. It can go a long way. For example, you can name a company and just say software engineer. That's totally fine. But if you go a bit deeper, again, it can help some people. So what I would look for junior backend developers, if they have zero experience, that for me, if we are looking for a junior, is fine. But as long as I can see few of the other things, I love seeing internships. So that means that somebody went, it can be an internship that was made available by the university or just something you found on the side. It's not a job, but it just looks nice to see somebody who is putting in the time to actually do something that isn't a real job, like not like a real job, but it can it's most often even a non-paid internship. And if somebody puts that extra mile, that I love to see. Another thing for junior backend people is university degrees or certification from programming bootcamp. I know in today's world, not everybody says that software engineering degree or university degree is important. I like to think it's not really that important, but if you have it, it's great. I love to see where you went to college. I love to see where you went to university. If not, I love to see that you actually enrolled in one of the programming bootcamps. And I had a link here saying which are like the best coding bootcamps out there. If somebody passed any one of those, that person is probably a pretty decent junior because those bootcamps can be really competitive. And one other thing is self-made projects. So it's a bit tricky because when you are a backend person, it's not that easy to write a project that will showcase how good are you at backend. I would argue that when you are doing front end or design, it's easy to create a small web page. It can be a static one, or create some kind of design. It's easy to see. It's for people who are recruiting, easy to jump on somebody's gallery and see, oh, look, he did this animation, he did this style. It's really cool. It's fun to see. For backend developers, it's not that easy. And again, if somebody goes that extra mile and actually manages to do so, that for me is a good thing. And I actually have from few examples that I could pull from my older days. I can show it in the very end, that I would say still showed some of the logical struggles I was dealing with and few of my backend work. So we can show that at the very end if we have time. When it comes to senior backend developers, we want to check the experience. We want to see that person put X amount of years in the industry. I put X because we might looking for people who at least work 3 years or 5 years. So X can be whatever we need it to be. I love seeing a description of the work that's been done. That's something I just showed in the image before. You don't have to do it. I personally just like it. And role within the company. If you have been something, for example, if you are UX designer or front-end developer and we see that, that's perfectly fine. And we might look for senior people like that. But if we are looking for backend people, I would love to see that. I love to be able to tell that somebody has been doing a backend job. So looking at experience plus the skills might go a long way. And what's the ideal for senior backend developers is if your experience matches with recommendations you have. Recommendations is another section I will talk in a second. But if your position you are at has some recommendations, people are praising you for it, I love it. And also, if you see somebody working in top tier companies, FANG companies, or any of the big companies, and he has been a backend developer there, chances are he did pick up a lot of qualities because to get in those companies is a competitive process. And if he stay there for a long enough time, he or she, of course, it can only be a good thing. I don't think that if somebody went on a top tier company that they can stop working there or quit or whatever without picking any of good skill sets. So also if you see any of top companies in somebody's resume, that for me is a big plus, but again, that's kind of subjective. And now, what are the red flags? It's just mostly lying, because nobody is stopping you on LinkedIn to say, who is stopping me to say that I worked for Google for 5 years? Nobody. But what is a problem is when somebody finds out. So what happens if you are recruiting and you see somebody worked for 5 years at, I don't know, JetBridge, at our company, and we do some research and we find out that he didn't? You can be the best developer in the world, but if I see somebody lying about some experience, for me it's a red flag, and I would just I would terminate the process right there. But again, that's kind of subjective, and that's mostly about experience. I just don't like to see people lying. One thing I would say, there's still a gray area. For example, if a person worked at the company for 11 months and he puts a year in a resume just because a year sounds a bit better, I won't hold it against the person, even if I found out he worked a month less. So it's kind of a grayish area. But yeah, I just don't like when people put false experiences. Also, if they lie about the role. For example, if you were, I don't know, doing testing, one of the QA testing team, and you say you were a dev lead or tech lead, again, just the fact that you are lying about it doesn't make you seem very genuine, and I just don't love seeing it. So yeah, that's basically what are the red flags, and how does one actually check if somebody is lying? I don't know. I personally, what has been done, at least in my country, they would cross-reference, because we live in a small country, so you can basically confirm with somebody working at that company if the person X really worked there. And that was a check there was done. When it comes to big companies, it might be a bit trickier, but I still think it can be easily done. So now we get into more parts about everything I'm going to say next. It's all of these things are basically pluses or cherries on top. And first of them is recommendations. So when you see somebody getting recommended, that's a good thing. The only things to watch out for here are vague recommendations. And that's usually when your friends write them and they say, again, like, Bob was very good and got the job done. What does that really mean? Absolutely nothing. So you have to have more context. And if you don't, it can still be that somebody is having a good intention, but I just don't. If somebody is giving a recommendation, I love seeing a bit more details, and also fake recommendations. That's usually when your closest friends gave it to you. Again, it's not a red flag, but it's just something that's not really genuine. I don't like really seeing it. An excellent recommendation can be if you say that, for example, person really improved our performance by 50% because he introduced this or that, or helped us optimize that. It really showcases what a person did. And that for me is an excellent recommendation. And I always check that section because it really goes a long way to see somebody being recommended and praised. And also if somebody is giving recommendation to other people, that usually means that that person is at least meaning well. So I love seeing that section. And also accomplishments. So there are a few things like honors and awards. So I love seeing those. If somebody got a really competitive scholarship based on their academic success, or somebody attended a really, really hard course and managed to get a certificate, that's really good to have, good to see. The only thing kind of to check there is if that award is some kind of trivial award given to everyone. It's not bad to have, you can still name it, but I love seeing those, somebody get a really competitive scholarship, or somebody being mentioned in the university magazine or something as a praised, and saying that person was really good, either through the whole year or at a specific subject. Anything of that helps. Also, I love when people are actually doing courses. So if you did any if a person did any courses to help teach others, that's really impressive for me to see. Personally, I would say I'm really bad at giving presentations, so I would never see myself doing that, and I will never hold it against somebody who doesn't do those things. But if you are sharing knowledge and you are willing to do so, and you do it with such a pride, I love seeing that. And also, there's a project section, so if you ever did something, you want to showcase it. That's what I love seeing, somebody proud of their work. And also publications. We had one of our colleagues just recently publish a book about expert programming in Python. That for me is just amazing. When I see that, for me, he published a book in a language we are interested in. That for me is already a candidate on its own, just based on that publications and seeing a good reviews. It's really, really nice to see. And also the last section I'm going to talk about is about me section. This one is very, very subjective. I know some recruiters, some people don't like reading this section or like having it really short. For example, somebody saying just, hey, I'm a software engineer. I work with this, this, and this is perfectly fine for them and they prefer it. What I personally love seeing is somebody pulling in more work into it and showcasing their road and how they got to where they are. And I found there was like a post about 10 best LinkedIn summaries, and this was one of them. I'm pretty sure this is a fake profile, but it was still a very nice about me, and it really showcases what the person has gone through. And at the end, he also names, these are my specialties. These are the things I love doing. And for me, I just love seeing it, but this section is totally subjective. So yeah, that's kind of all I was gonna say for this presentation. I try to keep it under 30 minutes, showcasing various sections on the LinkedIn post and what we can see. Just to kind of see, because I did mention I was gonna show how you can demonstrate your backend work. Let me quickly find it. Can you see the screen? I'm guessing not. I'll have to stop sharing just for a second. Okay, hopefully you can see the screen. So I wanted to kind of, when I was younger, I wanted to showcase what I did. A few years ago, I tried doing like competitive programming, and that's basically algorithms, stuff like that. And I got really good at it, but I never really knew how to show people that I learned something. And then I just decided, let me just make a quick app where I will, you can see design here is absolutely atrocious. Just one point saying I'm not that great at designing, but I wanted to showcase what I learned when it came to algorithms. And let's just go to the JetBridge maybe page. I want to steal a picture from there. Hopefully you don't mind. Maybe you can go with this one. We can open it in the new tab. And this app basically, you can decide how many columns, let's say four rows and 4 columns, and you paste an image. And what it does, it shuffles the image around, it gets scrambled, and you can choose any of these sorting algorithms. And you can see how those algorithms work in trying to get this picture back to where it was. And it's like, this is like one of the easiest algorithms, but also easiest to showcase that you are at least able to write them. And we can choose, for example, selection sort. I won't really go into it. At the very bottom, you can see, for example, how much time it took in the background to actually do this, what the time complexity was. And I felt proud when I did this. This was like maybe 2-3 years ago, just to kind of showcase that I did do some kind of algorithms. And also, when the COVID started, I was really into chess because you couldn't really play any sports. So me and my friend decided, we were really wondering how some pages managed to make chess games like Chess.com or Lichess or the most popular ones, how they managed to do it. And we decided to create a small app. The whole gist of the app was you subscribe and every day you get a new chess puzzle on your email that basically goes where a computer plays a blunder move and you have to finish the puzzle. And this is kind of how it looked. Design is terrible again, but the whole idea was computer plays the blunder move and you have how many moves to complete. And again, it's not like a really amazing app by any means, and especially not something that somebody should be proud of, but I just thought it at least showcased some of my backend knowledge. And we also use some really interesting technologies there like Kafka. It was a complete overkill, but we just wanted to show that we learned it and stuff like that. So yeah, that's kind of what I did to kind of showcase some of my backend knowledge. And yeah, that's pretty much all I was gonna say for this presentation. And if you have any questions, feel free to shoot. We can discuss a bit more about LinkedIn profiles.
Thank you for the presentation. I have a question about microservices. So is it easy for someone who has never worked with microservices to pick up this architecture?
Well, I would say like if you are a decent backend developer or somebody who has been in industry for a few years, it's not the hardest concept. There are a few new technologies you have to pick up, especially when it comes to when the whole code is one place, everything is together, and it's easy to make parts of code communicate with one each other. What happens when you have microservices, you have one service here, and in many different places. The hardest part becomes how do those services communicate together? And I would say that even today, people don't have the perfect idea. A lot of them are using like event streamings with Kafka, but to kind of sum up, it's not the hardest thing in the world to learn, but you have to be willing and yeah, put in some extra time.
Okay, so it's not worth considering such candidate.
No, I would definitely say it's worth it. If somebody, the only thing that wouldn't be, I would say, a candidate that just refuses to learn or explore new ideas, that's a bad candidate. But whoever is willing to learn microservices is a good one, and we use them in one of our clients like a lot. So it's a good thing to have in your tool belt.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you so much for your presentation. I think it was really good. I don't know if I can ask it, but is there a bit specific question? Beside what you said about the backend profile and how to evaluate it, there's something that you will look at and or you evaluate it in a profile for a backend that works with Python and Scala, or Python and Django and React.
Can you just repeat the question about Python, Scala, and?
Yes, Python, Scala, or a profile that has Python, Django, and React, and sorry, AWS.
Oh yeah, so I think that when you look at the skills, I usually would just say I would love to see things that we actually need. If you go to our Notion page that I think Nate and Dom keep very up to date, we are looking for people right now, I think that are seniors at Django and Python. So I would look at those things. But if for example, if you saw a person good at Python, Scala, it still says Python. So we can maybe assume that he knows Django. So I would still say it's a good candidate regardless. But if I see maybe Scala and Golang and absolutely no Python, then maybe I would say, I'm not sure for our position. But yeah, it's kind of, it ties to what we need. And I would say that seeing the language is more important than seeing some of the frameworks like Django, because if somebody knows the language, he might already be familiar with the framework, just not naming it specifically.
Yeah.
I would add there that the language and the framework for people that have some level of experience, I'm not sure what that is, maybe 4 or 5, 6 years or something, maybe in that ballpark. Somebody with enough experience can pick up any language or framework that they need to work with. And we've done that a lot. We've hired people that have done that a lot. People often are hired and pick up whatever they need to learn for that particular job. The reason is they all sort of do the same thing at the end of the day. They all, like all the web frameworks, all the languages, they do more or less the same thing. Just they have maybe slightly different ways of doing it. But if you understand, if you've worked for a while with, a few different environments, languages, frameworks, then, the skills mostly transfer over. It's just, oh, this is what we call it in this framework, or this is, what you have to type to do it in this language. But I think that the exact skills and framework match for a more senior person is not too important. We have a lot of experience of ourselves, personally picking up all kinds of stuff as we need it, and hiring people to do that as well. And usually clients are okay with it if the person is sufficiently experienced in, let's say, web development in general.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Sure.
Thanks, Misha.
By the way, Julia, your microphone's very loud.
Sorry.
So Frodo, going on to like the skills section and looking at that, if somebody just lists absolutely every single technology they've ever like viewed, touched as like a project, what are your thoughts on that as a developer?
Well, I don't know. So I would first of all look at experience. If somebody has 10 or 5+ years of experience, that person could very actually be very good with all of those languages. And especially when I actually talk about microservices, one of the cool things about microservices is you can write every service in a different language. And if I see somebody with 5 years of experience and he, for example, says he's working with microservices, I'm not judging. Who am I to assume that he hasn't actually worked with all of those languages he listed? So I don't personally mind it, but I would still say that probably would be good to write somewhere the languages you are most proficient in, maybe in the About Me section, or maybe putting those languages at the very top, just so we know what your preference is. Because yeah, as Misha said, you can pick up any language. That's called like being language agnostic. You can do any language that requires, but I still think that some people are just usually better and prefer few languages over the others. And I would like to see that referenced at least somewhere.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. All right. Does anybody else have any questions? All right. Well, Frodo, thank you for the time. It was a great presentation. This will be saved on our Notion page for this. So thank you again for taking out the time to speak with us.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.